The sun barely peeked over the rolling hills of Millfield, Ohio, a small town where the air smelled of freshly cut hay and the distant hum of tractors. In the summer of 2025, Emma Thompson lay in a sterile hospital bed, her frail hands trembling as she clutched the thin blanket. At 66, her body was worn from decades of toil, but her mind was sharp, replaying a distant and painfully close life. Her gray eyes, once bright with hope, now reflected a quiet resignation as she traced the lines of a life shaped by sacrifice. 40 years ago in 1985, her husband James Carter had vanished, leaving behind a single scrawled note, "Take care of my parents and our daughter." Those words written in his hurried script had anchored her existence, chaining her to a promise she didn't fully understand. Emma had been 26, then a young woman with dreams of a simple but happy life in their modest ranch house, one of the first brick homes built in Millfield. The house, inherited from her parents after their tragic deaths in a factory accident, was her sanctuary, a place where she and James planned to raise their daughter Lily. But James's disappearance shattered that dream. The note left on the kitchen table was all she had to cling to. No explanation, no goodbye, just a directive to care for his aging parents, John and Mary Carter, and their 2-year-old daughter Lily. Emma had read it over and over, her tears smudging the ink, believing James had been driven to despair, perhaps even taken his own life. The uncertainty gnawed at her, but she pushed it down, determined to honor his final wish. For decades, Emma bore the weight of that promise alone. She worked tirelessly, hauling firewood, tending the garden, and sewing clothes late into the night to keep the family afloat. Millfield was a tight-knit community where neighbors like Sarah Miller offered occasional help, but Emma's pride kept her from asking for much. She cooked hearty meals of cornbread and stew for John and Mary, who lived with her in the ranch house, their presence a constant reminder of James. They were kind enough, but their silences often felt heavy, as if they knew more than they let on. Emma dismissed her suspicions, chalking them up to grief. She raised Lily with fierce love, teaching her to read by candlelight, saving every penny to buy her school books. Lily grew into a strong, kind woman, her laughter a rare light in Emma's exhausting days. As the years passed, John and Mary grew frail. Emma nursed them through illnesses, paid for their medicines, and sat by their bedsides until they passed away, John at 78 and Mary at 80. Emma's hands were calloused by then, her back stooped from years of labor. She worked odd jobs, cleaning houses, mending fences, while Lily pursued a nursing degree, a source of pride that kept Emma going. Now in the hospital, her body weakened by a lifetime of hardship, Emma felt a quiet peace. She had fulfilled James's request, raising Lily into a woman who stood tall and cared for others. As she lay there, tubes snaking from her arms, she thought of the stories she'd told Lily, tales of resilience, of love that endured despite betrayal. Those stories she hoped would live on. Lily sat beside her, her warm hand enveloping Emma's cold fingers. Tears glistened in Lily's eyes as she whispered, "Mom, someone's here to see you, an old friend." Emma's heart skipped, a flicker of curiosity piercing her fatigue. Who could it be after all these years? The door creaked open, and there he stood, James Carter, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his hair silver but his posture unbowed. Beside him was a younger woman with smooth skin, a designer dress, and a teenage boy with James's eyes. Emma's breath caught her mind reeling. James was alive. Not dead, not lost, but alive, standing before her as if the past 4 decades were a mere footnote. His voice, calm and patronizing, cut through her shock. "Emma, we were married once in name at least. You raised my daughter and looked after my parents. It's only right that I come to see you off." The words landed like a slap. He spoke as if granting her a favor, his new wife Sophia, she later learned, smiling stiffly, her hand resting possessively on James's arm. The boy shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Emma's gaze. The truth crashed over her like a storm. James hadn't died. He'd abandoned her, built a new life, and become a wealthy businessman in Columbus with a family that knew nothing of her sacrifices. Rage surged in her chest, a fire she hadn't felt in years. Her vision blurred, her heart pounding as she stared at the man who betrayed her trust, love, and life. Emma's mind raced back to the note, to the years of scraping by, to the nights she cried herself to sleep, believing she'd failed him. She'd honored his parents and raised his daughter while he'd lived in luxury, free of the burdens he'd left her. The injustice burned, but so did a spark of something else resolve. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but her body was too weak. As her consciousness faded, she felt a strange pull, a whisper in her soul. This isn't the end. Her story, she realized, deserved to be told, to inspire others who'd faced betrayal. If her tale moved you, dear viewer, hit that like button, comment about a time you overcame hardship, and subscribe to our channel to hear more stories of triumph. Emma's journey was far from over, and what came next would shock everyone who'd underestimated her. The world spun a kaleidoscope of memories and pain, until Emma Thompson jolted awake, her heart pounding like a drum. She was no longer in a hospital bed 66. Her hands, smooth and firm, clutched a crumpled piece of paper. James Carter's farewell letter, dated February 1985, 6 months after he'd vanished from their Millfield home. She was 26 again, sitting at the worn kitchen table in her family's ranch house, the air thick with the scent of coffee and wood smoke. The letter's words stared back at her. "Take care of my parents and our daughter." Her breath hitched as the truth flooded her mind, sharp and unforgiving. This wasn't a dream. She'd been reborn, sent back to the moment she'd first read those words by a force she could only describe as her unfulfilled spirit crying for justice. In her previous life, Emma had held that letter night after night, her tears soaking the paper as she imagined James lost to despair, perhaps drowned in the Ohio River or wandering some distant city. She'd believed he was dead, a victim of his own pain, and she'd carried the guilt of failing him. But now the memory of his hospital visit burned in her mind. James, alive and prosperous, standing beside his new wife, Sophia, and their son, mocking her sacrifices with his casual cruelty. The words "I'm leaving" didn't mean death. They meant betrayal. He'd abandoned her, and Lily started a new family in Columbus and built a fortune while she toiled in poverty. The realization hit like lightning, electrifying her with rage and clarity. Emma's hands trembled as she smoothed the letter, her mind racing. In her past life, she'd been naive, accepting John and Mary's vague assurances that James was gone for a while. She'd stayed in Millfield, raising Lily and caring for her in-laws, never questioning their silences. But now she saw the truth. James had planned his escape, likely with his parents' help. They'd known he was alive, perhaps even in contact with him, while she worked herself to the bone. The betrayal wasn't just James's, it was a conspiracy that had stolen her youth, dreams, and dignity. Yet this second chance, this inexplicable gift of rebirth, was her opportunity to rewrite her story. Her spirit, restless after a lifetime of injustice, had pulled her back to this moment, demanding she seize control. She stood, her legs steady despite the whirlwind in her chest, and looked around the familiar kitchen. The ranch house built by her parents was modest but sturdy, its brick walls a testament to their hard work before the factory accident that claimed their lives. Emma's father had been a union man, his death earning the family a compensation job at the Columbus steel factory, a job James had insisted on taking, claiming it was too dangerous for Emma. She'd trusted him, believing his promises of a better future. Now she saw his ambition for what it was, a hunger to escape Millfield's quiet life, to chase wealth and status, leaving her to bear the consequences. Once a mystery, his motivations were clear. He'd craved a life bigger than their small town could offer, and she'd been the price he paid. Emma's gaze fell on Lily, playing quietly with wooden blocks in the corner, her tiny face lit with innocence. At 2, she was too young to understand her father's absence, but Emma felt a pang of guilt for the life Lily had endured in her previous timeline, scraping by, watching her mother struggle. "Not this time," Emma whispered, kneeling beside her daughter. She brushed a curl from Lily's forehead, vowing to protect her, to give her a future free from James's shadow. This rebirth wasn't just for Emma, it was for Lily, for the life they both deserved. Her anger softened into resolve, a fire that burned with vengeance and love. She paced the kitchen, her mind mapping out the next steps. James was in Columbus, likely at the factory or planning his new life with Sophia. She'd tried to find him in her past life, but John and Mary had stopped her, spinning tales of his temporary troubles. Their complicity stung, but it also gave her leverage. The town of Millfield was small, and its people were quick to rally around one of their own. If she could expose James's lie, make his death a public spectacle, she could force the truth into the open. The idea sparked in her mind a staged funeral, a bold move to shame James and his parents, to draw the community to her side. It was risky, but Emma felt alive with purpose, her spirit humming with the chance to right the wrongs of her past. As dawn broke over Millfield, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Emma stepped outside, the letter tucked into her pocket. The town was waking, the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer mingling with the chatter of neighbors. Sarah Miller waved from her porch, her warm smile a reminder of the community Emma had leaned on in her darkest days. This time she wouldn't be alone. She'd rally Millfield, expose James's betrayal, and reclaim her life. The weight of her past life lingered, but so did the promise of her second chance. Emma straightened her heart steady, ready to face the man who'd thought he could erase her. The battle was beginning, and she was no longer the woman who'd wept over a letter. She was a force reborn to take back what was hers. Emma Thompson sat at the kitchen table of her family's ranch house in Millfield, Ohio, on the dawn of February 1985, casting a pale glow through the window. Her hands, no longer frail but strong and unmarred, gripped James Carter's farewell letter, its words etched into her memory. "Take care of my parents and our daughter." The paper trembled, not from weakness, but from the fire coursing through her veins. She was 26, again reborn, at the moment she'd first read those words in her previous life, a life where she'd spent 40 years believing James had taken his own life. The truth burned brighter than the morning light. James hadn't died. He'd abandoned her and their daughter Lily to chase wealth and a new family in Columbus, leaving her to bear the weight of his parents and their child alone. The revelation wasn't just a memory, it was a gift, a second chance granted by the restless spirit of her past self, unwilling to let James's betrayal go unpunished. Emma had been naive in her previous life, clinging to the letter as a sacred duty, trusting John and Mary Carter's vague assurances that James was gone for a while. She'd toiled in Millfield, raising Lily, nursing her in-laws, her dreams buried under endless chores. But the hospital scene from her past life replayed vividly, James impeccably dressed, standing beside his new wife Sophia and their son, declaring he'd come to see her off as if her sacrifices were a debt he'd never owed. The condescension in his voice, the ease of his new life, ignited a fury that transcended time. Emma rose, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor, and looked at Lily, playing with wooden blocks in the corner. At 2, Lily's curls bounced as she hummed, oblivious to her father's betrayal. In her past life, Emma had watched Lily grow up in poverty, her bright eyes dimmed by want. The memory stabbed Emma's heart, but also steeled her resolve. "This time you'll have everything, sweetheart," she whispered, brushing a hand over Lily's head. Lily looked up, her tiny voice soft. "Mama's sad." Emma forced a smile, her throat tight. "No, baby. Mama's strong. We're going to be okay." That moment crystallized her purpose. This rebirth wasn't just for vengeance, but for building a future where Lily could thrive. Her mind churned, piecing together James's motives. In her past life, he'd taken the factory job meant for her family after her father died in a steel mill accident. He'd promised it was for their future, but now she saw it clearly. James craved escape from Millfield's quiet rhythms, from the simplicity of their life. With its promise of wealth and status, the Columbus factory had lured him away. He'd likely planned his disappearance, perhaps with John and Mary's help, spinning a lie to free himself while leaving Emma to carry his burdens. The thought of their complicity stung, but it also sharpened her focus. If James thought he could erase her, he was wrong. Emma paced the kitchen, the scent of coffee lingering from her untouched mug. Millfield was a small town, its people quick to rally around their own. She remembered how neighbors like Sarah Miller had brought casseroles during hard times, their kindness a lifeline. In her past life, she'd been too proud to ask for help, but now she saw the power of community. If she could expose James's lie and publicize his abandonment, she could turn Millfield's loyalty into her strength. An idea sparked a bold, audacious plan to stage James's death. A public funeral with a memorial portrait and mournful music would force John and Mary to confront their deception and draw the town to her side. She tucked the letter into her pocket, her heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. In her past life, she'd tried to find James walking to the bus station with Lily in her arms, only to be stopped by John and Mary's pleas. They'd claimed James was upset and that a scene at his workplace would ruin his career. She'd believed them, her trust blinding her to their lies. Now she saw their words for what they were, a cover to protect James's new life. This time she wouldn't be swayed. She'd use the town's gossip mill, church suppers, and barnyard chats to spread the news of James's passing. The pressure would crack John and Mary's facade and maybe even draw James out of hiding. Emma stepped onto the porch, the winter air biting her cheeks. Across the road, Sarah Miller's farmhouse glowed warmly, a reminder of the support waiting for her. The town's main street lined with mom-and-pop shops, and a diner buzzed faintly as Millfield woke. Emma's past life had been one of quiet endurance, but this life would be different. She wasn't just a grieving widow anymore, she was a woman reborn, armed with the truth and ready to fight. James had underestimated her, but he'd soon learn the cost of his betrayal. As the sun climbed higher, Emma felt the weight of her second chance, a gift she'd wield like a sword to carve out justice for herself and Lily. The Millfield morning was crisp, the February frost glittering on the fields as Emma Thompson stood in her kitchen, her mind racing like a runaway train. The farewell letter from James Carter tucked in her pocket was a constant reminder of his betrayal. Take care of my parents and our daughter. At 26, reborn through the mysterious force of her unfulfilled spirit, Emma was no longer the naive woman who'd wept over those words, believing James dead. She knew now he'd fled to Columbus chasing wealth and a new life with Sophia, leaving her to raise Lily and care for his parents, John and Mary Carter. The hospital scene from her past life, James's smug return after 40 years, fueled her determination to make him pay, not just for her, but for Lily, whose childhood deserved more than scraps. Emma's plan was bold, almost theatrical, but it felt right. She'd staged James's death in Millfield, turning his lie into a public spectacle. If John and Mary knew he was alive, as she suspected, a mock funeral would force their hand, exposing their complicity. With its tight-knit community of farmers and shopkeepers, the town would rally around her, their outrage a weapon against James's deception. She envisioned a memorial portrait, a somber band, and tears, hers real but strategic, to draw every eye in Millfield. It was risky, but the thought of James's carefully built world crumbling under the town's scrutiny thrilled her. She bundled Lily into a warm coat, and the toddler giggled a balm to her nerves. "We're going on an adventure, sweetheart," Emma said, kissing her forehead. Lily's small hand clutched hers, and Emma felt a surge of love mixed with guilt. In her past life, Lily had grown up in a house strained by poverty, her dreams limited by Emma's struggles. This time Emma vowed that Lily would know a mother who had fought back. She headed to the town's print shop, a small storefront next to the diner where old Mr. Jenkins ran a clunky press. "Morning, Emma," he greeted, peering over his glasses. "What's the rush?" Emma said. "I need a portrait," made her voice steady despite her racing heart. She handed over a faded photo of James, his boyish grin mocking her from the paper. "Enlarge it like for a memorial, big enough to hang in the church hall." Mr. Jenkins raised an eyebrow but nodded, sensing her resolve. As the press hummed, Emma's mind wandered to James's motives. He'd taken the factory job meant for her family, a compensation for her father's death in the steel mill. She'd trusted him, believing he'd build a future for them. Instead, he'd used it to escape Millfield's simplicity, his ambition outweighing his love. The realization stung, but it also clarified her path. She'd reclaim what was hers. Next, she visited the town's only music store, where a group of locals formed a brass band for parades and funerals. "I need you at my place tomorrow," Emma told their leader, Pete Grayson, a grizzled farmer with a trumpet. "Play something mournful like for a funeral." Pete scratched his head. "Who passed, Emma?" She swallowed, her eyes misty but firm. "James. I got word he's gone." The lie felt heavy, but Pete's sympathetic nod told her it landed. Word would spread fast in Millfield, where news traveled quicker than the morning mail. Back home, Emma prepared for the performance. She hung James's enlarged portrait above the fireplace, its somber frame dominating the living room. She practiced her tears, letting the real pain of her past life fuel them. In that life, she'd been stopped from seeking James by John and Mary's excuses, their pleas about his career. She'd stayed raising Lily alone while James built a fortune. Now she saw their silences as betrayal, their vague assurances a shield for their son. The thought of confronting them sent a shiver down her spine, not of fear but of anticipation. She'd make them squirm, make them admit what they knew. As evening fell, Emma sat with Lily, reading a story about a brave girl who faced a dragon. Lily's eyes sparkled and she said, "Mama, you brave too." Emma's heart swelled, her emotional growth surfacing in the quiet moment. "I'm learning to be baby," she whispered. Her past life had been about endurance, but this life was about courage. She wasn't just fighting for justice, she was building a legacy for Lily, a future where her daughter could dream big. The town's support would be key, and Emma knew Millfield's people would stand by her once the truth came out. Sarah Miller, her neighbor, had already stopped by, offering a pie and a listening ear. "You're not alone," Emma Sarah had said, and those words echoed now, a promise of community strength. By nightfall, whispers of James's death were already spreading. Emma overheard two women at the general store, their voices low. Poor Emma, left with a toddler and those Carters. The gossip was her ally, setting the stage for tomorrow's spectacle. She tucked Lily into bed, and the ranch house was quiet, except for the creak of the floorboards. In her past life, she'd let John and Mary's lies keep her from the truth. This time she'd use the town's eyes and ears to unravel their deception. As she lay down the letter in her pocket, Emma felt the weight of her second chance. Tomorrow she'd light the match that would burn James's lies to the ground, and Millfield would watch it blaze. The morning sun bathed Millfield, Ohio in a golden haze, but the air crackled with tension inside Emma Thompson's ranch house. It was February 1985, and Emma, reborn at 26 through the mysterious force of her unfulfilled spirit, stood in her living room clutching the enlarged memorial portrait of her husband, James Carter. His farewell letter, "Take care of my parents and our daughter," burned in her pocket, a reminder of his betrayal. She'd spent her past life believing he'd died raising their daughter Lily and caring for his parents John and Mary Carter, while James built a new life in Columbus with Sophia. Now, armed with the truth, Emma had staged a public funeral to expose his lie, and the town was buzzing. The brass band, led by Pete Grayson, played a mournful tune outside, their trumpets and tubas echoing across the fields. Neighbors gathered in Emma's yard, their faces a mix of shock and sympathy. Sarah Miller, her closest ally, stood nearby, whispering, "You're doing right, Emma." Emma's tears were real, drawn from the pain of her past life sacrifices, but they were also strategic, amplifying the town's outrage. Lily, 2 years old, sat on a blanket, her wails piercing the air as she sensed her mother's distress. Emma knelt beside her, heart aching. "It's okay, sweetheart," she murmured, smoothing Lily's curls. Lily's small voice trembled. "Where, Daddy?" Emma's throat tightened. "He's lost, but we'll find our way," she said, her resolve hardening. This wasn't just for her, it was for Lily's future. The crowd swelled, farmers in overalls and shopkeepers in aprons, murmuring about James's death. Emma held up the portrait, her voice breaking. "James is gone. This letter's all he left." She read aloud, "Take care of my parents and our daughter." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Dawson from the diner clutched her scarf, muttering, "Poor Emma left with a toddler and those Carters." The gossip was precisely what Emma needed, tightening the noose around James's lie. She'd learned in her past life that John and Mary had covered for him, their silences hiding his new life. Now she'd forced their hand. The front door slammed open, and John and Mary Carter stormed in, their faces flushed from the fields. John's eyes widened at the portrait, his voice booming, "Emma, what in God's name are you doing?" Mary's hands shook, her gaze darting to the crowd. Emma wiped her tears, holding up the letter. "John, Mary, and James are gone. He wrote this. We have to honor him." Her voice quavered, but her eyes were sharp, watching their reaction. John's face turned red, then pale, his fists clenching. "This is nonsense," he shouted. "You can't declare him dead over a letter." Mary grabbed his arm, whispering, "John, hush." Their panic confirmed Emma's suspicions. They knew James was alive. The townsfolk stirred, their sympathy shifting to suspicion. Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm. "John, if James ain't dead, where is he? Emma's been raising your granddaughter alone." Others chimed in, their voices rising. "Yeah, where's James? You know something, don't you?" Emma seized the moment, her heart pounding. "If he's alive, I'll find him. I'm going to his factory in Columbus." She scooped up Lily, her small frame warm against her chest, and moved toward the door. John blocked her, his eyes wild. "You can't go, Emma. You'll ruin his job, his future." Mary nodded frantically. "He's just upset, that's all. Give him time." Their words echoed her past life when they'd stopped her with the same excuses, keeping her from the truth. She'd trusted them back then, staying in Millfield while James built his fortune. Now she saw their desperation as proof of their complicity. James had fled to escape Millfield's simplicity, his ambition outweighing his vows. The factory job meant for Emma's family after her father's death had been his ticket out, and his parents had helped him abandon her. Emma's voice rose steady, despite her racing pulse. "If James is alive, why won't you tell me where? What are you hiding?" The crowd pressed closer, their murmurs turning to demands. "Answer her, John." Sarah gripped Emma's shoulder, her eyes blazing. "You deserve the truth, Emma. We're with you." The community support was a lifeline, a stark contrast to her past life's isolation. In that life, she'd raised Lily in poverty, her dreams buried under endless chores. Now Millfield's loyalty fueled her courage. Lily clung to her, whispering, "Mama brave." Emma nodded, tears pricking her eyes. "Yes, baby, for you." This moment wasn't just about exposing James, it was about rewriting her legacy, showing Lily a mother who fought back. John and Mary exchanged a glance, their faces pale, but Emma wasn't done. She'd push until their lies crumbled and Millfield would be her witness. The air in Emma Thompson's ranch house was thick with tension, the February 1985 morning sun doing little to warm the scene unfolding in Millfield, Ohio. The brass band's mournful notes had faded, but the crowd of neighbors lingered in Emma's yard, their eyes fixed on John and Mary Carter. Reborn at 26, through her unfulfilled spirit's mysterious gift, Emma held James's farewell letter. "Take care of my parents and our daughter," and faced her in-laws, her heart a storm of resolve and betrayal. She'd staged James's death to expose his abandonment, knowing he was alive in Columbus building a new life with Sophia. The town's outrage had forced John and Mary into her living room, their guilty glances confirming they'd helped James hide his escape. Emma stood tall, Lily in her arms, and the toddler's small hands clutched her sweater. The memorial portraits of James loomed above the fireplace, its presence a silent accusation. John, Mary, and Emma said, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "If James is alive, tell me where he is. I'm going to Columbus to find him." John's face twisted, his voice sharp. "You can't go, Emma. You'll ruin everything, his job, his life." Mary's eyes darted away, her hands twisting her apron. Their words mirrored her past life when they'd blocked her, with vague promises keeping her from the truth while James chased wealth. Now Emma saw their panic as proof they'd known all along. The townsfolk packed into the room, murmured angrily. Sarah Miller, her neighbor, stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "John, you're hiding something. Emma's been slaving away for your family and you won't tell her where her husband is." Mr. Dawson from the diner added, "If James is fine, why the secrecy? Speak up." The community's support was a tidal wave washing away Emma's past isolation. In her previous life, she'd raised Lily alone, believing James dead, while John and Mary lived in her house, their silences a betrayal. Now their evasions were unraveling under Millfield's scrutiny. Emma's eyes locked on John's, her voice rising. "You knew he left us, didn't you? You helped him." Mary gasped, her face paling, but John shook his head, stammering, "We don't know where he is." The letter didn't say his lie was flimsy, and the crowd sensed it. Mrs. Jenkins from the print shop crossed her arms. "Then why are you so scared of Emma going to Columbus?" Lily whimpered, sensing the tension, and whispered, "Mama, are they mad?" Emma hugged her close, her heart aching but resolute. "They're scared, sweetheart. We're finding the truth." This moment with Lily's innocent question grounded Emma's fight not just for justice, but for a future where her daughter could trust in strength. Emma's mind flashed to James's motivations. He'd taken the factory job meant for her family a compensation for her father's death in the steel mill. She'd trusted him, believing he'd provide for them, but his ambition to escape Millfield's quiet life had driven him to abandon her. John and Mary, she realized, had likely received letters or calls helping him craft his lie while she toiled. The legal weight of his abandonment loomed, desertion was grounds for divorce, and the factory job was rightfully hers. Emma straightened, her voice firm. "If you won't tell me, I'll find him myself. A man doesn't vanish without a trace." She moved toward the door, Lily in her arms, but John lunged forward, his arms wide. "You can't go, Emma. You'll destroy his career." Mary clung to her sleeve, pleading, "He's just upset. Give him time." Their desperation was palpable, a mirror of her past life when they'd stopped her with the same excuses. Back then, she'd stayed raising Lily in poverty while James thrived. Now she shook off Mary's hand, her eyes blazing. "I've given him years. If he's alive, I deserve to know." The crowd roared in agreement, their voices a chorus of support. "Go, Emma. Find the truth." Sarah gripped Emma's shoulder, her eyes fierce. "We're behind you, Emma. You're not alone." The community's loyalty starkly contrasted with her past life's solitude, where she'd shouldered every burden alone. In that life, she'd believed John and Mary's lies, letting them keep her from Columbus. Now their guilt was cracking under the town's pressure. Emma's emotional growth shone through. She wasn't just angry. She was strategic, using Millfield's unity to corner her in-laws. She knew James was likely at the factory or planning his wedding to Sophia, and she'd find him no matter the cost. John's shoulders slumped, his voice softer. "All right, let's talk this over tonight. We'll get Tom Harris to check on James." Tom, a factory coworker who'd helped James get his job, was a name from Emma's past life, a man who'd later exposed James's bigamy. She nodded, feigning agreement, but her mind was set. She'd go to Columbus herself, using John and Mary's hesitation to fuel her plan. Emma felt Millfield's strength behind her as the crowd dispersed, whispering about the Carters' secrecy. The town would talk, and their gossip would be her weapon. Holding Lily close, she whispered, "We're going to make things right, baby." The battle was heating up and Emma was ready to strike. The twilight sky over Millfield, Ohio, painted the fields in shades of amber as Emma Thompson stood in her ranch house kitchen, her heart a cauldron of resolve and unease. It was February 1985, and Emma, reborn at 26 through the mysterious force of her unfulfilled spirit, clutched James Carter's farewell letter. "Take care of my parents and our daughter," its words a searing reminder of his betrayal. In her past life, she had believed James dead, raising their daughter Lily and caring for his parents John and Mary Carter, while he built a new life with Sophia in Columbus. Her staged funeral had exposed John and Mary's complicity, their guilty protests fueling Millfield's outrage. Now Emma needed to force them to Columbus, where she'd confront James at his rumored wedding and devise a risky plan to make it happen. Emma's mind churned as she prepared supper, the scent of cornbread filling the air. Lily, 2 years old, played nearby, stacking blocks with a giggle. "Mama, look," she chirped, holding up a wobbly tower. Emma smiled, but her heart ached. In her past life, Lily had grown up in poverty, her dreams stifled by Emma's struggles. Emma said, "That's beautiful, sweetheart," kneeling to kiss her forehead. Lily's innocence was her anchor, a reminder that this fight was for their future. Emma's emotional growth was palpable. She wasn't just driven by anger, but by fierce love and determination to give Lily the life she deserved. Her past life's sacrifices, from hauling firewood to nursing John and Mary, had taught her resilience, but this life demanded cunning. Her plan was bold, even ruthless. She needed a reason John and Mary couldn't refuse to get to Columbus. In her past life, they'd stopped her from searching for James, citing his career. Now she'd use their own tactics against them. The Carter's mule, tethered in the barn, was known for its stubborn temper. Emma had overheard John complain about its restlessness when fed certain grains. Late that night, under the cover of darkness, she slipped into the barn, her breath visible in the chilly air. With a trembling hand, she mixed a small amount of red food dye into the mule's feed, knowing it would agitate the animal without causing lasting harm. Her heart pounded with guilt. She'd never been one for deceit, but the memory of James's smug hospital visit, his new family at his side, steeled her. This was justice, not cruelty. By dawn, chaos erupted. A scream shattered the morning quiet, Mary's voice shrill with pain. Emma rushed outside, feigning shock, to find Mary sprawled in the dirt, clutching her leg. The mule, wild-eyed, snorted nearby, its feed bucket overturned. John knelt beside Mary, his face ashen. "What happened?" Emma cried, though she knew. The mule kicked her. John shouted, his voice cracking. "She's hurt badly." Emma's pulse raced, but she kept her composure. "We need to get her to a hospital, John. The clinic in town won't do. Millfield's barefoot doctor, old Doc Wilson, was good for stitches, but not serious injuries." John hesitated, his eyes darting, but Emma pressed. "She could have broken bones or internal bleeding. We need Columbus." The townsfolk, drawn by the commotion, gathered at the yard's edge. Sarah Miller, Emma's fierce neighbor, pushed through Emma's right. "John, you can't wait." Others nodded, their voices rising. Get her to the city now. Emma's plan was working. The community's pressure left John no choice. In her past life, Mary had faked an injury to keep Emma from Columbus, claiming a long recovery. Emma had turned the tables, using a real incident to force their hand. James's motivations haunted her. He'd left to escape Millfield's simplicity, taking the factory job meant for her family after her father's death. John and Mary had likely known, helping him hide while she toiled. The legal weight of his desertion loomed. Emma could claim abandonment, but first she needed proof. John relented, his shoulders slumping. "Fine, we'll go to Columbus." Emma hid her triumph, scooping up Lily, who clung to her, whispering, "Nana hurt?" Emma nodded, her voice soft. "She'll be okay, baby. We're going to find answers." Lily's question grounded her, a reminder of the stakes. The town's support was a lifeline. Unlike her past life, where she'd faced every hardship alone, Millfield was now her ally. Sarah offered to watch the house, her eyes fierce. "You do what you gotta do, Emma. We've got your back." The community's loyalty hinted at the legacy Emma was building, one of resilience that would echo in Millfield for years. As they prepared to leave, Emma packed a small bag, her mind on Columbus. She'd heard whispers of James's wedding to Sophia, likely at a grand venue like the Riverside Hall. She'd never reached the city in her past life, stopped by John and Mary's lies. This time she'd confront James in front of his new world, exposing his bigamy. The mule incident, though drastic, was her key to the city, a calculated move to unravel James's lie. As the truck rumbled toward Columbus, Lily asleep in her lap, Emma felt the weight of her second chance. The road ahead was uncertain, but she was ready to face James with Millfield's strength behind her and Lily's future in her heart. The Columbus skyline loomed as Emma Thompson's truck rattled into the city, the February 1985 air sharp with winter's bite. Emma, reborn at 26, through her unfulfilled spirit, held Lily close, her resolve a burning ember. She'd orchestrated Mary Carter's hospital trip after the mule incident, knowing it would get her to Columbus, where James Carter was reportedly marrying Sophia. His farewell letter, "Take care of my parents and our daughter," had been a lie, masking his escape to a wealthy life, while Emma raised Lily and cared for John and Mary in Millfield. The hospital visit was her cover. Her real goal was the Riverside Hall, where James's wedding was unfolding, a chance to expose his betrayal. At the hospital, Mary was admitted, her leg swollen and possibly fractured. John paced, muttering about costs, but Emma's focus was elsewhere. She entrusted Lily to Sarah Miller, who'd joined the trip with other townsfolk, their presence a testament to Millfield's loyalty. "I'll be back soon," Emma told Sarah, her voice steady. "Keep an eye on Lily." Sarah nodded, her eyes fierce. "Get him, Emma." Lily tugged at Emma's coat, her voice small. "Mama, find Daddy." Emma's heart clenched, but she smiled. "I'm trying, sweetheart, for us." Lily's question fueled her. She wasn't just confronting James for herself, but for the daughter he'd abandoned. Emma led a group of neighbors, Mrs. Dawson, Pete Grayson, and others, to the Riverside Hall, a grand venue with chandeliers and velvet drapes. The journey from Millfield had been long, and the city's bustle was intrinsically contrasting to their quiet town. Inside, the wedding was in full swing, laughter and music spilling from the main hall. Emma's pulse quickened as she spotted James dashing in a tuxedo, toasting with a radiant Sophia. His familiar grin, once a source of comfort, now twisted her stomach. She nudged Sarah, whispering, "That's him." Sarah squinted, then gasped, "My God, it's James!" The group pressed closer, their murmurs drawing eyes. Emma's voice cut through the noise. "James Carter!" She stormed forward, her hand connecting with his cheek in a sharp slap. The room fell silent, glasses clinking as guests turned. "You left us, James, and now you're marrying her." Sophia's face flushed, her white gown pristine against James's shock. He stammered, I don't know you, but Sarah wasn't having it." "Don't lie, James. I watched you grow up. You left Emma a letter and ran." The townsfolk erupted, their voices a chorus of outrage. "You had a wife and child. How could you?" The legal weight of James's bigamy hit hard. Tom Harris, a factory co-worker who'd helped James get his job, stepped forward, his face dark. "James, this is illegal. You can't abandon a wife and marry another." Tom had exposed James's deceit in her past life, and now his presence was Emma's ace. James's motivations were clear. He'd fled Millfield's simplicity, using the factory job meant for Emma's family to chase wealth. The job, a compensation for her father's death, was rightfully hers, and James's desertion gave her grounds to claim it. Emma's voice rose steady despite her pounding heart. "You left us with nothing, James. I raised Lily and cared for your parents while you built this life." Sophia, furious, clutched James's arm. "This is my husband. We don't know you." But the townsfolk pressed closer, their anger palpable. Mrs. Dawson shouted, "He wrote that letter, Sophia. We saw it." Emma's emotional growth shone. She wasn't just angry. She was commanding, her pain channeled into strength. In her past life, she'd been alone, believing James dead. Millfield's support amplified her voice, and their presence was a promise of her lasting legacy as a woman who fought back. Lily's image lingered in her mind, her daughter's future driving every word. James tried to slip away, but Emma grabbed his sleeve, her eyes blazing. "You thought you could erase us. I'm here now, and everyone will know." Tom stepped in, his voice firm. "James, you'll answer for this. Bigamy's a crime, and the factory won't stand for it." The guests, mostly Sophia's family, whispered in shock, unaware of James's past. Emma's heart soared. She'd turned his lie into a public spectacle, just as she'd planned. The community's outrage was her weapon, from Millfield's farmers to Tom's authority. As chaos erupted, Emma stood firm, knowing this moment was only the beginning. She'd exposed James and reclaimed her life for herself and Lily. The Riverside Hall in Columbus, Ohio, buzzed with chaos, the February 1985 air thick with tension, as Emma Thompson stood at the center of James Carter's wedding to Sophia. Reborn at 26, through the mysterious force of her unfulfilled spirit, Emma had exposed James's bigamy, her slap across his face echoing in the stunned silence. His farewell letter. Take care of my parents and our daughter had been a lie masking his escape to a wealthy life, while Emma raised their daughter Lily and cared for his parents John and Mary Carter in Millfield. The townsfolk led by Sarah Miller crowded behind her, their outrage amplifying her voice. Now as James stammered denials and Sophia clutched his arm, Emma felt the weight of her second chance, a gift to rewrite her life and secure Lily's future. Lily, 2 years old and entrusted to a neighbor during the hospital visit for Mary's injury, was back in Emma's arms, brought by Sarah to the hall. The toddler's wide eyes darted across the glittering chandeliers, her small hand gripping Emma's. "Mama, is Daddy bad?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling with confusion. Emma's heart shattered, the innocence in her daughter's question cutting deeper than James's betrayal. In her past life, Lily had grown up in poverty, her childhood marked by want, never knowing her father's true fate. Emma knelt, her voice soft but firm. "He made a mistake, sweetheart, but we'll be okay. I promise." Lily's tiny nod fueled Emma's resolve. This fight wasn't just for justice, but for a future where her daughter could trust in love and strength. The crowd's murmurs grew louder, Millfield's farmers and shopkeepers glaring at James. Sarah shouted, "You left Emma and Lily with nothing." James Carter, Mrs. Dawson from the diner added, "We saw that letter. You told her to raise your kid while you ran off." Emma's emotional growth was evident. She stood tall, her pain transformed into purpose. In her past life, she'd been alone, believing James dead, her sacrifices unseen. Millfield's support was now a beacon, their loyalty a promise of the legacy she was building as a woman who fought back. She met James's eyes, his panic palpable, and spoke clearly. "You abandoned us, James. I raised Lily and cared for your parents while you built this life with her." She pointed at Sophia, whose face flushed with fury. Sophia snapped, "He's my husband. We don't know you." But her voice faltered under the crowd's scrutiny. Tom Harris, a factory co-worker who'd helped James secure his job, stepped forward, his face dark with anger. "James, this is illegal. Bigamy's a crime, and you know it." Tom's words carried weight. He'd been there when the factory job, a compensation for Emma's father's death in a steel mill accident, was assigned to James. Emma had trusted James to provide, unaware of his ambition to escape Millfield's simplicity for wealth and status in Columbus. The legal stakes were clear. James's desertion and bigamy gave Emma grounds to reclaim her life, starting with that job. Emma's voice rose steady and commanding. "That factory job was meant for my family, James. My father died for it, and you stole it to run away." The crowd gasped, their anger swelling. Pete Grayson, the brass band leader, shouted, "You used her father's death to get ahead, then left her." James tried to slip behind Sophia, stammering, "We didn't register our marriage, Emma. It's not legal." His excuse only fueled the outrage. Sarah stomped forward. "You held a wedding in Millfield. The whole town knows you're married." The legal weight of their public ceremony, recognized by the community, bolstered Emma's case, and she knew it. Emma's mind flashed to her past life where she'd toiled alone, believing James's lie. The hospital scene, his smug return after 40 years, still burned, but now she was rewriting that story. She looked at Lily, clinging to her, and felt a surge of love. "I'm doing this for you," she whispered, too low for others to hear. The community's support, from Sarah's fierce loyalty to Tom's authority, was her strength. In Millfield, her resilience would be remembered, a story whispered at church suppers for years. James's motivations, his hunger for a bigger life, had driven his betrayal, but Emma was no longer his victim. She faced him, her voice unwavering. "You thought you could erase us, James, but I'm here and everyone sees you for what you are." Unaware of James's past, Sophia's relatives whispered among themselves, their shock palpable. Tom turned to Emma, his voice firm. "You've got rights, Emma. The factory will hear about this, and I'll ensure they do right by you." The promise ignited hope she could reclaim the job and secure a future for Lily. As the hall descended into chaos, Emma stood firm, Lily's small hand in hers. She'd exposed James's lie, turned his wedding into a reckoning. But this was only the beginning. She'd fight for more than justice, a life where Lily could dream without limits, and Millfield would stand with her. The Riverside Hall's chandeliers cast flickering shadows as Emma Thompson faced James Carter, the February 1985 heir in Columbus, Ohio, heavy with the weight of her accusations. Reborn at 26, through her unfulfilled spirit, Emma had exposed James's bigamy at his wedding to Sophia, her slap and Millfield's outrage shattering his facade. His farewell letter, "Take care of my parents and our daughter," had left Emma to raise Lily and care for John and Mary Carter while he chased wealth. Now, with the townsfolk and Tom Harris, the factory co-worker, behind her, Emma was ready to reclaim what was hers, not just for justice, but for the legacy she'd build for Lily and Millfield. Lily clung to Emma's side, her tiny voice barely audible over the crowd's murmurs. "Mama, why does Daddy run?" she asked, her eyes wide with confusion. Emma's heart ached, but she knelt, her voice gentle. "He's scared, sweetheart, but we're strong together." Lily's question anchored her purpose. Every step was for her daughter's future, free from the poverty of her past life. Emma had believed James dead in that life scraping by while he thrived. Now her emotional growth shone through. She wasn't just angry, but empowered, channeling her pain into a fight for dignity. Emma stood facing James, whose face was pale, his tuxedo rumpled. "You left us with nothing, James. I want to divorce custody of Lily and the factory job you stole." Her voice was steady, cutting through the hall. The job, a compensation for her father's death in a steel mill accident, was rightfully hers, given to James when she'd trusted his promises. His ambition to escape Millfield's simplicity had driven him to abandon her. But now the legal stakes were clear: desertion, and bigamy gave her grounds to reclaim her rights. She pulled a worn notebook from her pocket, its pages detailing years of expenses, groceries, medical bills for John and Mary, and clothes for Lily. "I covered everything over $1,500. You owe me, James." Sophia, her wedding gown pristine, scoffed. "You're making this up." But Emma's glare silenced her. "Half your salary was mine by right, James. Pay it back or I'll tell the factory you're a bigamist." The crowd roared, Sarah Miller shouting, "Pay her, you coward!" Tom Harris nodded, his voice firm. "The factory won't stand for this, James. That job was for Emma's family." James's eyes darted, but he had no escape. Sophia, furious, pulled a wad of cash from her purse, slamming it on a table. "Take it and go," she spat. Emma counted the bills, $1,500, not a penny less, and tucked them away, her heart steady. James pleaded with Emma to stay in Millfield. "I'll send money monthly. You don't know how tough the city is." Sophia sneered. "A country girl like you can't handle a factory job." Their words echoed Emma's past life, where she'd stayed home trusting their lies. Now she saw through them. "That job's mine," she said, her voice like steel. "My father died for it, and I'm taking it back." Tom turned to her, his eyes kind. "I'll talk to the factory bosses, Emma. They'll give you a fair shot." The promise was a lifeline. She'd secure a future for Lily, free from James's shadow. The townsfolk cheered their support, starkly contrasting with her past life's isolation. Mrs. Dawson hugged Emma, whispering, "You're Millfield's pride." The community's loyalty hinted at the legacy she'd leave, a woman who rose above betrayal. In her past life, she'd toiled alone, believing James's lie. Now she stood tall, her courage a story that would echo in Millfield's diners and churches. James's motivations, his hunger for wealth, had unraveled, and his new life was exposed as a sham. Emma faced him one last time. "You thought you could bury us, James, but I'm taking back my life for Lily and me." As the crowd dispersed, Sophia's relatives whispering in shock, Emma held Lily close, her daughter's warmth grounding her. The legal weight of James's crimes, bigamy, desertion, gave her power, but Millfield's support gave her strength. She'd return to the hospital, check on Mary, and plan her next steps. The factory job was her first victory, a step toward independence. She'd faded into obscurity in her past life, but now she'd build a future where Lily could thrive and Millfield would remember her as a force. Emma walked out of the hall, Lily's hand in hers, the weight of her second chance lighter with every step. She'd won this battle, but the war for her daughter's future was far from over. The spring breeze carried the scent of blooming wildflowers into Millfield, Ohio, as Emma Thompson stood on the porch of her family's ranch house, her heart lighter than it had been in 2 lifetimes. It was April 1985, and Emma, reborn at 26 through the mysterious force of her unfulfilled spirit, had confronted her husband James Carter at his wedding to Sophia in Columbus, exposing his bigamy and reclaiming her life. His farewell letter, "Take care of my parents and our daughter," had been a lie, leaving Emma to raise their daughter Lily and care for his parents John and Mary Carter while he chased wealth. With the factory job rightfully hers and a divorce secured, Emma was ready to build a future for herself and Lily, free from James's shadow. Back in Millfield, the town buzzed with tales of Emma's courage. Sarah Miller, her fierce neighbor, had rallied the community to help evict John and Mary from the ranch house, a brick home inherited from Emma's parents after their tragic deaths in a factory accident. The eviction was swift. Sarah and a group of women moved the Carters' belongings to their old farmhouse across the road, their voices sharp with disapproval. "You hid James's betrayal," Sarah had scolded, and John's silence confirmed their guilt. Emma stood firm, her voice steady. "This house is mine. My parents built it, not you." Lily, playing nearby, looked up and asked Mama if we were staying here. Emma nodded, her heart swelling. "Yes, sweetheart. This is our home now." Lily's question anchored her purpose. Every step was for her daughter's stability. Emma's emotional growth was evident. In her past life, she'd toiled in isolation, believing James dead, her dreams buried under endless chores. Now she channeled that pain into strength, determined to give Lily a life of opportunity. The divorce had granted her custody and $1,500 from James, a sum she'd meticulously recorded in a notebook of household expenses. The factory job, a compensation for her father's death, was her subsequent victory. Tom Harris, the co-worker who'd exposed James's bigamy, had spoken to the factory bosses in Columbus. He told her, "They're giving you a sales position," his eyes kind. "It's yours by right." Emma's heart raced. She'd refused a safer logistics role, knowing sales offered growth, a lesson from her past life when James had thrived in that department. Emma packed a small bag, her hands steady despite the weight of change. She and Lily moved to Columbus, settling into a modest factory dormitory, a single room with a cot and a window overlooking the city's smokestacks. She enrolled Lily in the factory's daycare, where the toddler's giggles echoed among other children. "Mama, I like school," Lily said one morning, her smile bright. Emma hugged her, tears pricking her eyes. Lily had known only hardship in her past life, her dresses patched and worn. Emma vowed to give her books, toys, and a future. Entrusting the ranch house to Sarah's care, Emma promised to visit Millfield on weekends, the town's support a constant anchor. "You're one of us," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. "We'll keep your home safe." In the sales department, Emma thrived. Her boldness and work ethic earned her top performer status within months. She navigated deals with confidence, her past life's lessons guiding her. She'd seen James sense the factory's decline early, using connections to succeed. Emma did the same, building relationships with clients and saving every dollar. By 1989, when the factory restructured, Emma was ready. She took a voluntary layoff, her savings bolstered by loans from Millfield friends, and opened a small appliance store in Columbus. The shop, tucked beside a diner, grew steadily, its shelves stocked with radios and toasters. Emma hired staff, expanded to new locations, and became a local success story, her name whispered with pride in Millfield's churches and diners. The community's support shaped her legacy. In Millfield, Sarah shared stories of Emma's rise, the town marveling at her resilience. "She faced down a liar and built an empire," Mrs. Dawson said at a church supper, her voice warm. Emma's past life had been one of obscurity, her sacrifices unseen. She was Millfield's pride, a woman who'd turned betrayal into triumph. James's motivations, his hunger for wealth over love, had exposed him, while Emma's legal victory, reclaiming the job and divorce, grounded her success. As she tucked Lily into bed one night, her daughter now 5 and thriving, Emma felt the weight of her second chance. She'd built a new life for herself and Lily, and Millfield would remember her as a force who rose above. The Columbus sun glinted off the glass windows of Emma Thompson's flagship appliance store, a bustling hub in 1995, a decade after her rebirth at 26 through her unfulfilled spirit. Emma, now 36, stood behind the counter, her empire of stores a testament to her resilience. She'd exposed James Carter's bigamy at his wedding to Sophia, reclaimed the factory job meant for her family, and secured a divorce and custody of their daughter Lily. His farewell letter. "Take care of my parents and our daughter," had been a lie, leaving Emma to raise Lily and care for John and Mary Carter in Millfield while he chased wealth. Now, with Millfield's support and grit, Emma had built a life of independence, her legacy cemented in the town's pride. One afternoon, a familiar figure shuffled into the store, his suit worn and eyes weary, James Carter. Emma nearly didn't recognize him, his once charming grin replaced by a forced smile. James had used his factory connections to start an appliance dealership in her past life, thriving with Sophia's family money. Now, without the job, his ambitions had crumbled. He'd tried various ventures, car sales, real estate, but his ego outpaced his ability, leaving him broke. "Emma," he said, his voice flat. "I heard you're hiring. We're old friends, right? Please make me a store manager." Emma's smirk was cold. "If you're hungry, I'll buy you lunch, James, but you'll never run my stores." Lily, now 12, peeked from the back office, her voice soft. "Mama, is that him?" Emma nodded, her heart steady. "Yes, sweetheart. But he's not our family anymore." James's face reddened, his voice sharp. "You wouldn't have this without me, Emma. Be grateful." His words echoed Sophia's taunts from the wedding, but Emma stood firm. In her past life, she'd lived in poverty, believing James dead while he thrived. Now her emotional growth shone. She wasn't swayed by guilt, only strengthened by her journey. Millfield's legacy of a triumph was evident. Stories of Emma, who faced down a liar, were told at every diner, her resilience inspiring young women. James's motivations, his hunger to escape Millfield's simplicity, had led to his downfall, his bigamy and desertion, leaving him without the factory's backing. John and Mary Carter appeared days later, their hair white and postures frail. "Emma, we're your parents," Mary rasped, clutching her arm. "You're rich now. Give James a store." John nodded, his voice pleading. "Think of Lily's father." Emma shook them off, her voice icy. "My parents died years ago. Your house is across the road in Millfield. Go back." Across the street, Sophia stood, visibly pregnant, her eyes burning. Emma had seen them in luxury in her past life while she and Lily scraped by. Now their desperation was poetic justice. Emma pointed at Sophia. "There's your daughter-in-law. Ask her for help." Sophia charged forward, grabbing a broom from a street cleaner, shrieking, "You owe us!" She swung wildly, but John dodged, while Mary, coughing, took a hit, collapsing with a groan. The chaos drew a crowd, but Emma stayed calm, and her legal victories, divorce, custody, the factory job, were her shield. Sophia, undeterred, returned the next day, her pregnant belly prominent, blocking the store's entrance. "These stores are ours too," she shouted, stopping customers. Emma's employees panicked, but she had a plan. She called Sarah Miller, who arrived with a group of Millfield's older women, each paid a small fee to sit at the entrance, knitting and chatting. They shifted when Sophia tried to push through, blocking her path with smiles. "We're just enjoying the sun," Sarah said, winking at Emma. Sophia stumbled, falling hard, and wailed, "They pushed me!" The women laughed, insisting she tripped. The police, seeing no evidence left and Sophia nursing a bruised tailbone, retreated. Millfield buzzed with the story, Sarah relaying the chaos. Sophia demanded lavish meals, exhausting John and Mary, whose farmhouse later burned in a fire that Sophia blamed on a cooking mishap. John was hospitalized with smoke inhalation, Mary with a broken leg, leaving James to care for them, and Sophia's newborn. Sarah visited Emma, chuckling. "James is drowning, Emma. Retribution's real." Emma handed her a basket of apples, her heart full. "Thank you, Sarah. Without Millfield, I wouldn't be here." The town's support had shaped her legacy, and her stores are a symbol of resilience. Lily, now thriving, hugged her, saying, "Mama, we're happy." Emma squeezed her hand, knowing her second chance had rewritten their story. As Columbus hummed around her, Emma stood tall, her triumph complete, her life a beacon for Millfield and beyond.